The transport shuttle shook as it entered the docking bay of Kepler Station. Lisa Morgan gripped her rifle case tighter and watched through the small window as alien ships moved around the massive space station. She had never seen so many different species in one place before. The shuttle pilot announced their arrival over the intercom, and Lisa stood up with the other passengers. She was the only human on the transport. The other passengers were tall, blue aliens with crystal-like skin called Zeltharians. They wore shiny uniforms and carried weapons that glowed with energy. Lisa looked down at her own simple green military uniform and the old rifle case in her hands. Her M24 sniper rifle was inside that case. It was not shiny or glowing. It was just metal and wood and had seen many battles. The shuttle doors opened, and Lisa stepped onto the station. The air smelled different here. It was clean but had a strange metallic taste. The docking bay was huge. Ships of all sizes came and went. Alien workers moved cargo containers with floating platforms. Lisa had never seen technology like this before. She followed the signs that pointed toward the military section. Her boots made clicking sounds on the metal floor. Other passengers from the shuttle walked past her quickly. They were taller than her, and their long legs carried them faster. Lisa did not try to keep up. She had learned long ago that being patient was better than being fast. A group of Zeltharian officers stood near a checkpoint. They wore decorated uniforms that showed their ranks. Lisa could see energy weapons on their belts. The weapons hummed with power even when they were not being used. One of the officers looked at Lisa as she approached. His crystalline face showed confusion. Lisa presented her orders to the officer at the checkpoint. He scanned the document with a device that beeped and flashed green. The officer looked at Lisa again and then at her rifle case. He said something to the other officers in their own language. Lisa did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. They were not impressed. The checkpoint officer handed back her orders and pointed down a long corridor. Lisa thanked him and walked in the direction he showed. More aliens passed her in the hallway. Some were Zeltharians, but others were different species she had never seen before. They all had advanced weapons and equipment. They all looked at her with curiosity or amusement. The corridor led to a large area filled with military personnel. This was where all the different species worked together. Lisa saw weapons being cleaned and equipment being checked. Everyone was preparing for something important. She found the human section in one corner of the area. It was much smaller than the alien sections. Lieutenant Commander Jake Peters was waiting for her. He was the only other human she had seen since arriving at the station. Jake smiled when he saw her and walked over to shake her hand. He was tall and thin with short brown hair. Lisa had worked with Jake before on other missions. He was her spotter and one of the best at his job. Jake told Lisa that they had been assigned to a defensive mission. Enemy forces called the Vrak. Confederation were planning to attack a mining colony. The Alliance needed to stop them. Lisa nodded and asked about their assignment. Jake explained that they would be part of a mixed unit with alien soldiers. The Zeltharians would be in command. Lisa unpacked her rifle from its case. The M24 looked very old compared to the alien weapons around them. It was black metal with a wooden stock. The scope was simple but accurate. Lisa ran her fingers along the rifle until she found the small marking on the stock. It was a tiny emblem that looked like a crosshair with a star in the center. This was the Deadeye Emblem. Very few snipers ever earned this mark. Jake saw her touching the emblem and smiled. He remembered the day she earned it. It was during a battle on a planet called Proxima 5. Lisa had made a shot that everyone said was impossible. The target was so far away that the bullet took almost 4 seconds to reach it. The shot saved dozens of lives and ended the battle. A loud voice echoed through the area. All personnel were ordered to report to the main briefing room. Lisa secured her rifle and followed Jake through more corridors. The briefing room was enormous. Hundreds of alien soldiers filled the seats. Lisa and Jake found places near the back. They were the only humans in the room. Colonel Thexvar entered the room and everyone stood at attention. He was a massive Zeltharian with dark blue crystal skin and gold markings on his uniform. His presence commanded respect from all the alien soldiers. The colonel began speaking about the upcoming mission. His voice was deep and carried clearly through the room. During his speech, Colonel Thexavar noticed Lisa and Jake in the back. He paused and asked them to stand. Lisa felt hundreds of alien eyes looking at her. The colonel announced that these were the human specialists assigned to their unit. He mentioned that Lisa was a sniper with primitive ballistic weapons. The word primitive caused murmurs through the room. Some of the alien soldiers made sounds that Lisa guessed were laughter. Colonel Thexvar continued his speech, but Lisa could see the amusement in his crystalline features. He clearly did not expect much from human weapons. After the briefing, alien soldiers approached Lisa and Jake. They wanted to see the primitive human weapons. Lisa showed them her M24 rifle. The aliens examined it with curiosity. One Zeltharian officer picked it up and was surprised by how heavy it was. He asked how it worked without energy cells or plasma chambers. Lisa explained that the rifle fired metal bullets using chemical explosives. The aliens looked confused. They could not understand why humans still use such old technology. One officer commented that their plasma rifles could fire much faster and with more power. Lisa nodded politely but did not argue. Jake tried to explain that human weapons were reliable and accurate. He mentioned some of Lisa's previous accomplishments. The alien officers listened but clearly did not believe the stories. They thought Jake was exaggerating to make human weapons sound better than they were. As the crowd dispersed, Colonel Thexvar approached Lisa directly. He looked down at her rifle and shook his head. He told her that she would be assigned to support duties during the mission. He did not want her primitive weapon interfering with their advanced tactics. Lisa accepted the assignment without complaint, but Jake looked frustrated. That night, Lisa cleaned her rifle in their assigned quarters. She checked every part carefully and made small adjustments to the scope. The weapon might look primitive to the aliens, but Lisa knew its capabilities. She had made shots with this rifle that defied logic and physics. The Deadeye Emblem on the stock was proof of that. Jake watched her work and asked if the alien attitude bothered her. Lisa smiled and continued cleaning her rifle. She had faced skepticism before. People always underestimated what looked simple or old. Tomorrow she would have a chance to show them what human precision could accomplish. The Deadeye Emblem caught the light as she worked, waiting for its next impossible shot. The next morning brought another call to the briefing room. Lisa and Jake entered to find the same crowd of alien soldiers, but the atmosphere was more serious now. Colonel Thexvar stood at the front with a large holographic display behind him. The display showed a planet surface with buildings and mining equipment scattered across a desert landscape. Colonel Thexvar began explaining the situation. The mining colony on Zerion 4 was under threat from Vrak Confederation forces. The Vrak were a hostile species that attacked colonies to steal resources. They used massive mechanical walkers called siege walkers to break through defenses. These machines were the size of buildings and heavily armored. The holographic display changed to show the siege walkers. Lisa studied them carefully. They walked on 4 thick legs and had multiple weapon systems mounted on their bodies. The armor looked incredibly thick. Energy blast marks on the display showed where previous attacks had failed to penetrate the walkers' defenses. Colonel Thexvar explained that conventional weapons had little effect on siege walkers. It usually took concentrated fire from multiple plasma cannons to bring one down. Even then, the process was slow and dangerous. Many Alliance soldiers had died trying to stop these machines. The colonel's voice carried frustration as he described previous failed attempts. A Zeltharian captain named Zil-Eth stood up to ask about tactics. She was smaller than most Zeltharians, but carried herself with confidence. Her plasma rifle was decorated with marks showing successful missions. Captain Xylith suggested using their new particle beam cannons against the walkers. These weapons were the most advanced in the Alliance arsenal. Colonel Thexvar nodded and activated another part of the display. It showed the weapons they would use in the mission. Plasma rifles, particle beam cannons, and energy grenades filled the holographic space. Each weapon glowed with power and displayed impressive statistics. Range, damage, and rate of fire numbers scrolled beside each weapon. The alien soldiers murmured with approval as they saw their advanced arsenal. Many had never seen the new particle beam cannons before. The weapons looked sleek and deadly. Their energy cells could power hundreds of shots before needing replacement. The technology represented the best engineering from multiple alien species. Colonel Thexvar then called for the unit assignments. He named the Zeltharian squads and their positions. Each squad had specific targets and coordination patterns. The alien soldiers responded with crisp acknowledgments when their names were called. They knew their equipment and trusted their technology. When Colonel Thexvar reached the human assignment, his tone changed slightly. He announced that Staff Sergeant Lisa Morgan would provide long-range support with ballistic weapons. Several alien soldiers turned to look at Lisa with amusement. Some made comments in their own languages that sounded like jokes. Captain Zilith stood up again and asked about human weapon capabilities. She wanted to know the effective range and damage potential of ballistic rifles. Jake started to answer, but Colonel Thexvar interrupted him. The colonel stated that human weapons were limited but might be useful for finishing damaged targets. Lisa felt her jaw tighten, but kept her expression neutral. The colonel was clearly placing her in a role where she could not interfere with his main tactics. He expected the siege walkers to be destroyed by energy weapons long before her rifle would be needed. She was being assigned to cleanup duty. The briefing continued with tactical details. The siege walkers always attacked in groups of 3. They moved slowly, but their armor deflected most attacks. Previous missions had shown that only sustained fire from multiple directions could bring them down. The Alliance had lost many soldiers learning these lessons. Colonel Thexvar displayed battle footage from previous encounters. Lisa watched carefully as plasma bolts struck the walker armor and bounced off or dispersed. The energy weapons left. Scorch marks but rarely penetrated deep enough to cause real damage. Multiple hits in the same spot sometimes broke through, but it took time and perfect coordination. The footage showed Alliance soldiers taking cover as walker weapons fired back. The siege walkers carried plasma cannons and missile systems. Their return fire was devastating to infantry positions. Lisa noticed that the walkers seemed to have sensors that helped them target enemies. These sensors were mounted in various locations on the walker bodies. After the footage ended, Colonel Thexvar opened the floor for questions. Several alien officers asked about ammunition supplies and backup plans. Others wanted clarification on communication protocols. The questions showed that these soldiers were experienced and thorough in their preparation. Captain Zilith asked about the human sniper again. She wanted to know if ballistic weapons had any advantages over energy. Weapons. Jake stood up to answer this time, and the colonel allowed him to speak. Jake explained that ballistic weapons were more reliable in harsh conditions and did not depend on energy cells that could fail. The alien soldiers listened politely, but Lisa could see they were not convinced. Energy weapons had served them well in previous battles. They could not imagine why anyone would choose slower, heavier ballistic weapons when advanced plasma technology was available. Their expressions showed polite skepticism at best. Jake continued by mentioning some of Lisa's previous accomplishments. He told them about shots she had made at extreme ranges. He described how she had eliminated targets that were impossible to hit, according to computer calculations. The alien soldiers began looking more amused than skeptical. One Zeltharian officer commented that targeting computers were very accurate and rarely made mistakes. He suggested that perhaps the human computers were not as advanced as they claimed. Other officers nodded in agreement. They found it hard to believe that any organic being could outperform advanced targeting systems. Lisa finally spoke up. She stood and addressed the room in a calm voice. She explained that human snipers trained differently than most soldiers. They learned to read wind patterns, calculate bullet drop, and account for target movement without relying on computers. Everything depended on skill and experience rather than technology. The room became quiet as Lisa spoke. Her voice carried confidence but not arrogance. She explained that her rifle might look primitive, but it had never failed her in combat. The weapon was simple, but that simplicity made it reliable. She had made shots in conditions that would disable energy weapons. Colonel Thexvar listened with growing impatience. When Lisa finished speaking, he thanked her for the explanation but stated that the mission would proceed according to established tactics. Energy weapons would handle the siege walkers, while Lisa provided support from a safe distance. He clearly wanted to end the discussion about human capabilities. The briefing concluded with final assignments and departure times. The alien soldiers filed out talking excitedly about their new particle beam cannons. Lisa and Jake remained in their seats until the room was nearly empty. Jake looked frustrated by the dismissive attitude they had encountered. Lisa stood and adjusted her rifle strap. She told Jake that words would not change anyone's mind. Actions were the only thing that mattered in combat. She had faced skepticism before and knew that performance was the best answer to doubt. Tomorrow they would have their chance to show what human training could accomplish. As they left the briefing room, Lisa noticed Captain Zilleth waiting in the corridor. The Zeltharian approached them with curiosity rather than hostility. She asked if she could examine Lisa's rifle more closely. Lisa agreed and showed her the weapon's basic components. Captain Zilleth was surprised by the rifle's weight and mechanical complexity. She asked about the small emblem on the stock. Jake explained that it was called a Deadeye Emblem and that very few snipers ever earned one. It required making shots that were considered impossible by normal standards. The captain looked at the emblem more closely and asked what kind of shot qualified as impossible. Lisa smiled and said that tomorrow they might find out. Captain Zilleth studied Lisa's face for a moment, and then nodded slowly. Perhaps there was more to human weapons than she had thought. The armory buzzed with activity as soldiers prepared their equipment for the mission. Lisa found a quiet corner where she could work on her rifle without interference. She laid out her cleaning kit and began the methodical process of checking every component. Each piece received careful attention as she verified its condition and function. Jake sat nearby organizing their ammunition. The bullets for Lisa's rifle looked tiny compared to the energy cells that powered alien weapons. Each round was carefully crafted with precise measurements and weight distribution. Jake had learned to appreciate the engineering that went into each bullet, even though it seemed primitive to others. Captain Zilleth approached their work area carrying her own plasma rifle. She watched Lisa clean her weapon with obvious curiosity. The Zeltharian had never seen such detailed maintenance performed on any weapon. Energy weapons required minimal care and rarely needed adjustment. She asked if ballistic weapons broke down often. Lisa explained that her rifle was actually very reliable, but precision weapons required precise care. A tiny amount of dirt or a slight misalignment could affect accuracy over long distances. She showed Captain Zilleth how she checked the barrel for any obstructions or wear. Every part had to be perfect for the weapon to perform at its best. Though, Captain picked up one of Lisa's bullets and examined it closely. She was surprised by how heavy it felt. The metal projectile seemed crude compared to plasma bolts that traveled at light speed. She asked how fast the bullets moved, and Lisa told her they reached about 800 meters per second. Captain Zilleth laughed and said her plasma rifle fired at 300 million meters per second. Lisa nodded and continued working on her rifle. She explained that speed was not everything in combat. Plasma bolts traveled fast, but they were affected by atmospheric conditions and energy fields. Her bullets traveled slower, but they were more predictable. She could calculate exactly where they would go regardless of conditions. Other alien soldiers gathered around to watch the unusual weapon maintenance. They had heard about the human sniper and wanted to see her primitive rifle. Most carried energy weapons that never needed such detailed attention. They found it amusing that humans still used technology that required so much manual work. A Zeltharian lieutenant named Corks picked up Lisa's scope and looked through it. He was surprised that it used simple lenses instead of computer displays. His own weapon had targeting systems that identified enemies and calculated firing solutions automatically. He asked how humans could aim accurately without computer assistance. Lisa took the scope back and explained that human eyes could see things that computers missed. She described how she learned to read wind patterns by watching grass move or dust blow. She could estimate distances by comparing object sizes and shapes. These skills took years to develop, but they never failed or ran out of power. Lieutenant Corks shook his head with amusement. He told Lisa that his targeting computer could measure wind speed and direction precisely. It calculated bullet drop and target movement automatically. He could not understand why anyone would rely on biological senses when technology was so much more accurate. Jake joined the conversation and mentioned Lisa's longest confirmed kill. He told them about a shot she made during the Proxima campaign that measured over 2,500 meters. The target was moving and the wind was gusting, but Lisa made the shot on her first try. The alien soldiers looked skeptical when they heard this story. Captain Zillith asked how such a shot was possible without computer assistance. Jake explained that Lisa had studied the target for over an hour before firing. She watched how the wind affected dust and debris. She calculated the target's movement pattern and waited for the perfect moment. The shot required patience and skill that no computer could replicate. The aliens found this story hard to believe. Lieutenant Corks pointed out that his weapon's computer could make thousands of calculations per second. He could not imagine how biological senses could compete with such processing power. He suggested that Jake might be exaggerating to make human weapons sound more impressive. Lisa finished cleaning her rifle and began reassembling it. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar process. She had performed this routine thousands of times and could do it blindfolded. The aliens watched with fascination as she put together the complex mechanical system without looking at instructions. As Lisa worked, she told them about human sniper training. Students spent months learning to shoot without any electronic assistance. They practiced in all weather conditions and at various ranges. Many failed the training because it required dedication and natural talent. Only the best shooters ever became qualified snipers. The alien soldiers listened, but remained unconvinced. Their training focused on learning to use advanced targeting systems and energy weapons. Physical skills were less important than technical knowledge. They could not understand why humans would choose difficult training when technology could do the work for them. Lieutenant Corks demonstrated his plasma rifle's targeting system. He pointed it at various objects around the armory, and the weapon automatically calculated range and firing solutions. Numbers appeared on his display showing exact distances and recommended aim points. He showed how the computer could track moving targets and predict their future positions. Lisa watched the demonstration with interest but did not seem impressed. She asked what happened if the targeting computer failed or was damaged in combat. Lieutenant Corks admitted that the weapon became much harder to use accurately without its computer systems. Most soldiers would struggle to hit targets beyond close range manually. This admission made some of the aliens uncomfortable. They had become dependent on their advanced technology and rarely considered what would happen if it failed. Lisa's rifle had no computers to malfunction or energy cells to run out. It would work as long as she had ammunition and the basic mechanical parts remained intact. Captain Zillith asked about the Deadeye Emblem on Lisa's rifle stock. Jake explained that it was earned by making shots under impossible conditions. The exact requirements were classified, but it involved hitting targets that were beyond the theoretical maximum range of the weapon. Very few snipers in human history had earned this distinction. The aliens examined the small emblem more closely. It was a simple design, but clearly meant something important to human soldiers. Captain Zillith asked if Lisa could demonstrate her shooting skills before the mission. She wanted to see human marksmanship in action rather than just hearing stories about it. Lisa considered the request but shook her head. She explained that wasting ammunition on demonstrations was not wise before a combat mission. Every bullet might be needed during the actual fight. She also pointed out that the station's shooting range was not long enough to show her rifle's true capabilities. The alien soldiers seemed disappointed, but understood her reasoning. They began returning to their own equipment preparations while talking among themselves. Lisa could hear them discussing human weapons in their own languages. The tone suggested they remained skeptical about ballistic weapon effectiveness. Jake helped Lisa finish organizing their gear. He could see that she was not bothered by the alien attitude, but he felt frustrated by their dismissiveness. He had seen Lisa perform miracles with her rifle and knew that tomorrow would surprise everyone. The aliens would learn what human precision could accomplish. Lisa checked her rifle one final time and secured it in its case. She told Jake that actions would speak louder than words. The siege walkers would provide a perfect opportunity to demonstrate human capabilities. She was confident that her rifle could find weak points that energy weapons had missed. As they prepared to leave the armory, Captain Zelith approached them again. She thanked Lisa for showing her the rifle and admitted that human weapons were more complex than she had expected. She hoped they would have a chance to work together during the mission. Perhaps she could learn something from human tactics. Lisa smiled and said she looked forward to the mission. She had studied the siege walker schematics carefully and identified potential vulnerabilities. Tomorrow would test whether human precision could succeed where alien technology had failed. The Deadeye emblem on her rifle seemed to catch the light as she spoke, waiting for its next impossible challenge. The transport ships dropped out of hyperspace above Zerion 4 and immediately detected the Vrak assault force. 3 massive siege walkers were already advancing across the desert toward the mining colony. Their hulking forms moved slowly but steadily, crushing everything in their path. The colony's emergency beacon was broadcasting desperate calls for help. Colonel Thexavar stood on the bridge of the command ship studying tactical displays. The siege walkers were larger than intelligence reports had suggested. Each machine stood nearly 50 meters tall and was heavily armored. Previous battle damage showed that Alliance forces had tried to stop similar walkers before with limited success. Lisa and Jake prepared for deployment in the shuttle bay. Their assigned transport was smaller than the main assault shuttles because they were only a support team. Lisa checked her rifle one final time while Jake organized their spotting equipment. The mission briefing had assigned them to an observation post well behind the main fighting positions. The descent to the planet's surface was rough. Atmospheric. Disturbances from the siege walkers' energy systems created turbulence that shook the small shuttle. Lisa held her rifle case steady and watched through the window as the desert landscape rushed past. The mining colony looked tiny compared to the approaching mechanical giants. Their shuttle landed at a defensive position about 3 kilometers from the colony. Alliance forces were already deployed in a defensive line with their energy weapons aimed at the approaching walkers. Plasma cannons and particle beam weapons were positioned on elevated platforms for better firing angles. The alien soldiers moved efficiently to their assigned positions. Colonel Thexvar established his command post on a rocky hill overlooking the battlefield. Communication equipment and tactical displays showed the positions of all friendly forces and the approaching enemy. The siege walkers were still 2 kilometers away, but their advance was steady and unstoppable. Lisa and Jake were assigned to an observation post even further back from the main defensive line. Colonel Thexvar made it clear that their role was to watch and report, not to engage the enemy. He expected the siege walkers to be destroyed by concentrated energy weapon fire long before Lisa's rifle would be needed. The first siege walker crested a sand dune and came into full view of the defenders. It was a terrifying sight with massive legs that shook the ground with each step. Weapon mounts covered its armored body and sensor arrays scanned for targets. The machine's design showed brutal efficiency focused entirely on destruction. Alliance forces opened fire immediately. Plasma bolts and particle beams lanced across the desert and struck the walker's armor. Bright flashes marked each impact, but the massive machine continued its advance without slowing. The energy weapons left scorch marks on the armor but failed to penetrate the thick plating. The siege walker returned fire with its own weapons. Plasma cannons mounted on its shoulders sent devastating bolts toward the Alliance positions. Explosions erupted around the defensive line as soldiers scrambled for cover. The walkers' targeting systems were accurate and deadly. Several alien soldiers were hit in the first exchange. Colonel Thexvar coordinated the defense from his command post. He ordered concentrated fire at the walkers' leg joints where the armor might be thinner. Multiple particle beam cannons focused their fire on a single joint, but the armor held. The weapons were having minimal effect despite their advanced technology. The second and third siege walkers appeared on the horizon and began their own advance. The defenders now faced 3 massive enemies approaching from different directions. The tactical situation was becoming desperate as energy weapons proved inadequate against the walker armor. Lisa watched the battle through her rifle scope from the distant observation post. She could see the impacts of energy weapons on the walker armor and how little damage they were causing. The aliens were using their most advanced weapons, but the results were disappointing. Traditional tactics were failing against these enemies. Jake used his spotting scope to study the siege walkers and look for weaknesses. He noticed that certain areas of the walkers had lighter armor or different materials. Some sections appeared to be sensor arrays rather than weapon mounts. These areas might be more vulnerable to precise attack. The lead siege walker was now within 1 kilometer of the colony. Its weapons continued to hammer the Alliance defensive positions, while its massive bulk provided an intimidating presence. Several defensive positions had been abandoned as casualties mounted among the alien soldiers. The situation was becoming critical. Colonel Thexvar called for all available weapons to focus on the lead walker. Every plasma cannon and particle beam weapon concentrated their fire on the machine's center mass. The combined assault created a spectacular light show but still failed to penetrate the heavy armor. The walker continued its relentless advance. Lisa requested permission to move to a better firing position. She had identified potential weak spots on the siege walkers that energy weapons had missed. Colonel Thexvar initially refused, stating that if their advanced weapons could not damage the walkers, her primitive rifle certainly could not help. The Alliance defense was beginning to crumble as the siege walkers closed the distance. Casualties were mounting and ammunition supplies were running low. The energy weapons that had seemed so impressive during the briefing were proving inadequate against these enemies. Desperation was setting in among the defending forces. Jake supported Lisa's request for permission to engage. He pointed out that their current tactics were failing and they needed to try different approaches. The siege walkers were almost within range of the colony, and time was running out. Something had to change or the mission would fail completely. Colonel Thexvar watched his forces struggle against the siege walkers and realized that conventional tactics were not working. The enemy had prepared for energy weapon attacks, and their armor was specifically designed to resist such weapons. He needed alternatives before his entire force was destroyed. Reluctantly, Colonel Thexvar granted Lisa permission to attempt engagement. He told her not to waste ammunition because they might need every round later. His tone made it clear that he expected her primitive weapon to be equally useless against the walker armor. He was allowing her to try only because he was running out of options. Lisa and Jake immediately began moving toward a better firing position. They needed elevation and a clear line of sight to the approaching walkers. Lisa had spotted a rocky outcrop that would provide the angle she needed for precise shots. The distance would be extreme, but that was exactly the kind of challenge she had trained for. As they moved into position, the battle continued to rage around them. Energy weapons flashed continuously as alien soldiers tried desperately to stop the siege walkers. The massive machines seemed unstoppable as they shrugged off every attack. The colony's fate hung in the balance. Lisa set up her rifle on the rocky outcrop and began studying the lead siege walker through her scope. She could see details that the alien weapons had missed. Small vulnerabilities existed in the walker's design, but they required precise targeting that energy weapons could not provide. Her rifle might be primitive, but it could deliver surgical precision. The siege walker was now 1,847 meters away and still advancing. Lisa began calculating wind speed, target movement, and bullet trajectory. This would be one of the longest shots she had ever attempted under combat conditions. The Deadeye emblem on her rifle stock seemed to whisper that impossible shots were her specialty. Jake provided atmospheric readings and target movement data. The siege walker's steady pace made it a predictable target despite its massive size. Lisa made minute adjustments to her scope and chambered a special tungsten core round designed for maximum penetration. Everything depended on the next few seconds. The fate of the colony and all the defending forces now rested on a single bullet fired from a weapon the aliens considered primitive and useless. Lisa steadied her breathing and focused entirely on the lead siege walker through her rifle scope. The massive machine filled her view as it continued its relentless advance toward the mining colony. Every step sent tremors through the ground that she could feel even at her distant position. The walker's armor showed countless scorch marks from energy weapon impacts, but no real damage. Jake lay beside her with his spotting scope, feeding her critical information. The wind was gusting from the northwest at about 15 kilometers per hour. The siege walker was maintaining a steady pace of roughly 4 meters per second. Jake calculated that the bullet would take nearly 3 seconds to reach its target at this extreme range. Through her scope, Lisa studied the walker's construction with intense concentration. The alien engineers who built these machines had designed them specifically to resist energy weapons. The armor was thick and angled to deflect plasma bolts, but they had not considered the threat of high-velocity projectiles striking with pinpoint accuracy. The walker's sensor cluster caught her attention. It was a small dome mounted near the machine's center of mass, protected only by a thin, transparent barrier rather than heavy armor. This sensor array controlled the walker's balance and coordination systems. Without it, the massive machine would lose its ability to walk upright. Lisa made careful adjustments to her scope to compensate for the extreme distance. The walker was now 1,847 meters away and still approaching. At this range, even a slight miscalculation would cause the bullet to miss by meters. She needed to account for wind drift, bullet drop, target movement, and atmospheric pressure. Her rifle's simple mechanics required her to make these calculations manually. The battle continued to rage around them as Alliance forces poured energy weapons fire into the siege walkers. Plasma cannons and particle beam weapons created a continuous light show, but achieved minimal results. The walker armor absorbed or deflected every attack while return fire devastated the defensive positions. Casualties were mounting rapidly among the alien soldiers. Colonel Thexvar's frustrated voice crackled over the communication system as he coordinated increasingly desperate attacks. Multiple weapon teams focused their fire on single targets, but could not achieve penetration. The most advanced weapons in the Alliance arsenal were proving useless against these enemies. Traditional tactics had completely failed. Lisa chambered her special tungsten core round and settled into her final firing position. This bullet was different from standard ammunition. It had a dense metal core designed for maximum penetration, and a specially shaped tip for accuracy over extreme distances. Jake had calculated the precise trajectory needed to reach the moving target. The siege walker crested a small hill and presented a perfect profile view. Lisa could see the sensor cluster clearly through her scope. The transparent barrier protecting it looked fragile compared to the surrounding armor. This was her target, a critical weakness that energy weapons had overlooked because they focused on causing massive damage rather than surgical precision. Jake confirmed wind speed and direction one final time. The atmospheric conditions were stable for the moment. The siege walker maintained its steady pace without deviation. Lisa controlled her breathing and began the slow squeeze of her trigger. Everything depended on the next few seconds. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the desert. The tungsten core bullet left the barrel at 850 meters per second and began its long journey toward the distant target. Lisa kept her scope focused on the siege walker and began counting seconds. The bullet would take 2.8 seconds to reach its destination. Time seemed frozen as the bullet flew across the battlefield. Alliance forces continued their futile bombardment of the siege walkers while the massive machines advanced toward the colony. No one except Jake was watching Lisa's single projectile as it arced through the desert air toward its tiny target. The bullet struck the sensor cluster with surgical precision. The tungsten core punched through the thin barrier and destroyed the delicate electronics inside. The impact was tiny compared to energy weapon strikes, but the effect was immediate and devastating. The siege walker's balance systems failed instantly. The massive machine stumbled as its coordination systems went offline. Its left front leg hit the ground at the wrong angle, and the walker began to topple sideways. 50 meters of armored destruction crashed into a rocky ravine with tremendous force. The impact shattered armor plates and sent debris flying across the desert. Complete silence fell over the battlefield as every soldier watched the impossible sight. The siege walker that had shrugged off hundreds of energy weapon strikes had been destroyed by a single bullet from a primitive ballistic rifle. The massive machine lay motionless in the ravine, its advance permanently ended. Colonel Thexvar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The lead siege walker's signal had simply disappeared from his screens. He demanded a status report from his forward observers, who confirmed that the machine had been destroyed. When he asked how this was possible, the observers reported seeing it fall after a single projectile impact. The alien soldiers looked toward Lisa's position with new understanding. Captain Zillith lowered her plasma rifle and stared through her own scope at the distant human sniper. The shot she had just witnessed defied everything she knew about ballistic weapons and their limitations. No targeting computer could have made such a precise strike under these conditions. Jake was already providing data for Lisa's next shot. The second siege walker had altered its course after seeing its companion fall, but was still advancing toward the colony. This machine was now 2,156 meters away and moving more cautiously. The enemy was learning to fear the invisible sniper who could destroy their invincible machines. Lisa studied the second walker through her scope and identified another vulnerability. A hydraulic line ran along the machine's side, partially protected by armor but visible at certain angles. This line powered the walker's main cannon. Severing it would disable the machine's primary weapon and force it to rely on smaller defensive systems. The second shot required even more precision because the target was smaller and partially hidden. Lisa waited patiently for the walker to present the correct angle. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger as she tracked the machine's movement. The alien soldiers watched in fascination as she prepared for another impossible shot. When the walker turned slightly to navigate around a boulder field, the hydraulic line became visible. Lisa fired immediately. The bullet traveled for nearly 3 seconds before striking the thin line with perfect accuracy. High-pressure fluid sprayed from the severed connection, and the walker's main cannon went silent. The siege walker continued advancing, but was now limited to its smaller weapons. More importantly, the enemy commanders realized they were facing a threat they had not anticipated. Their machines were designed to resist energy weapons, but were vulnerable to precise ballistic attacks that targeted specific components. The third siege walker had stopped its advance and was scanning for the sniper position. Its sensors searched the horizon for energy signatures or movement that might reveal the location of this new threat. But Lisa's rifle produced no energy emissions and she remained perfectly still between shots. Lisa was already calculating her third shot when she noticed the walker had deployed additional armor plates to protect its sensor clusters. The enemy was adapting quickly to this new threat. She would need to find a different vulnerability for her final target. The Deadeye Emblem on her rifle stock seemed to accept this challenge. Jake spotted a weakness in the walker's rear propulsion system. A cooling vent was visible when the machine turned to scan for threats. The vent was small and heavily protected, but Lisa could see a narrow gap in the armor that might allow access to critical components inside. The shot would require the walker to present the exact angle needed while remaining steady enough for precise targeting. Lisa waited with infinite patience as the machine continued its search pattern. Finally, the walker turned to face directly away from her position, and the gap became visible. Her third shot at 2,147 meters struck through the narrow gap and penetrated the walker's propulsion system. Internal explosions rippled through the machine as its power plant began to fail. The siege walker ground to a halt as its systems shut down one by one. The mighty machine became a useless metal monument in the desert. 3 impossible shots had destroyed 3 siege walkers that the Alliance's most advanced weapons could not scratch. The battlefield fell silent as everyone processed what they had witnessed. A primitive ballistic rifle had succeeded where plasma cannons and particle beams had failed. The impossible had become reality. Word of Lisa's impossible shot spread through the Alliance forces faster than light-speed communications. Every soldier who had witnessed the siege walker destruction wanted to know how a primitive ballistic weapon had succeeded where their advanced technology had failed. The mining colony was safe, but the victory raised more questions than it answered. Colonel Thexvar approached Lisa's position with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. He had commanded Alliance forces for over 20 years and had never seen anything like what had just occurred. His tactical display showed 3 destroyed siege walkers, but his understanding of weapons technology could not explain how this was possible. Captain Zileth accompanied the colonel along with several other Zeltharian officers. They wanted to examine Lisa's rifle and understand the mechanics behind her incredible marksmanship. The weapon that they had dismissed as primitive and useless had just saved the entire mission. Their assumptions about human technology were completely wrong. Lisa was cleaning her rifle when the group arrived at her position. She had fired only 3 rounds but was performing the same detailed maintenance that the aliens had found amusing earlier. Jake was recording shot data in his logbook with precise measurements and atmospheric conditions. Both humans treated their success as routine rather than miraculous. Colonel Thexvar asked to examine the rifle that had destroyed 3 siege walkers. Lisa handed over the weapon without hesitation. The colonel was surprised by its weight and the complexity of its mechanical systems. He had expected something crude, but found sophisticated engineering designed for precision rather than power. The small Deadeye emblem on the rifle stock caught the colonel's attention. Captain Zillith explained what Jake had told her about this marking. It was earned by snipers who could make shots beyond the theoretical maximum range of their weapons. Lisa had proven that the emblem represented real capability, rather than just ceremony. Lieutenant Corks examined one of Lisa's unused bullets with fascination. The tungsten core projectile looked simple, but felt incredibly heavy for its size. He asked how such a small object could penetrate armor that resisted plasma bolts. Lisa explained that kinetic energy worked differently than thermal energy, and could be focused with surgical precision. The alien officers struggled to understand how Lisa had identified the siege walker vulnerabilities. Their sensors had scanned the machines thoroughly but found only heavily armored surfaces. Lisa explained that she looked for functional weaknesses rather than structural ones. Every machine had critical components that could not be heavily protected. Jake showed them the detailed notes he had kept during the battle. He recorded wind conditions, range estimates, and target movement for each shot. The calculations looked primitive compared to computer targeting systems, but had produced perfect accuracy. The aliens began to realize that human methods were sophisticated in ways they had not appreciated. Captain Zylith asked about Lisa's training and how she had developed such incredible skills. Lisa described the years of practice required to become a qualified sniper. Students learned to shoot in all weather conditions and at extreme ranges. Most failed the training because it required natural talent combined with absolute dedication. Area 4. Aliens found it hard to believe that biological senses could outperform computer systems. Lieutenant Corks mentioned that his targeting computer made thousands of calculations per second. Lisa replied that computers could process data quickly, but could not interpret what they saw. Human intelligence was required to identify vulnerabilities that sensors missed. Colonel Thexvar asked about the maximum range of Lisa's rifle. Jake consulted his records and mentioned shots that Lisa had made beyond 3,000 meters under perfect conditions. The aliens looked skeptical until Jake showed them official documentation from previous battles. The human military kept precise records of all sniper accomplishments. The discussion turned to the Deadeye Emblem and what it truly represented. Captain Zylith had assumed it was ceremonial decoration, but now understood its significance. Jake explained that the emblem marked snipers who had transcended the normal limitations of their weapons. Lisa was one of fewer than 50 humans to earn this distinction. Lieutenant Corks asked if other human snipers could perform similar feats. Jake explained that all qualified human snipers trained to the same standards, but natural ability varied between individuals. Lisa represented the peak of human marksmanship, but other snipers could also exceed what aliens considered possible with ballistic weapons. The conversation revealed fundamental differences between human and alien military philosophy. Aliens had focused on developing more powerful weapons while humans had perfected the warriors who used those weapons. Technology was important, but skill and training were equally valuable. The combination of human intelligence and reliable weapons produced extraordinary results. Colonel Thexvar asked Lisa to explain her targeting process in detail. She described how she studied each siege walker to understand its design and identify critical systems. The sensor clusters were obvious weak points but required extreme precision to hit. Energy weapons created too much collateral damage to target such small components effectively. Captain Zylith wanted to know how Lisa compensated for wind and atmospheric conditions without computer assistance. Lisa explained that she had learned to read environmental signs that computers could not detect. The movement of dust and debris revealed air currents that affected bullet trajectory over long distances. The aliens began to understand that human snipers operated more like scientists than traditional soldiers. Lisa's approach involved careful observation, precise calculation, and patient waiting for perfect conditions. This methodology was completely different from the direct assault tactics that energy weapons encouraged. Jake mentioned Lisa's performance. During the Proxima campaign, where she had earned her Deadeye Emblem, she had eliminated 3 enemy commanders with a single bullet that ricocheted twice between metal structures. The shot required understanding of physics and geometry that no computer could have calculated in real time. Lieutenant Corks asked if Lisa could teach alien soldiers to use ballistic weapons effectively. Lisa replied that marksmanship required years of training and could not be learned quickly. However, alien soldiers could learn to appreciate the value of precision over power. Different situations required different tools and approaches. The group spent several hours discussing human military philosophy and training methods. The aliens were beginning to realize that they had underestimated human capabilities by focusing only on technology. The most advanced weapon was useless without a skilled operator who understood its capabilities and limitations. Colonel Thexvar made a decision that surprised everyone. He asked Lisa if she would be willing to establish a training program for Alliance forces. Her methods had proven effective against enemies that conventional weapons could not stop. The Alliance needed to learn from human expertise in precision warfare. Lisa agreed to consider the proposal, but insisted that any students must start with basic marksmanship principles. Alien soldiers would need to unlearn their dependence on computer targeting systems and develop natural shooting skills. The training would be difficult and many would fail to meet the standards. As the discussion continued, more alien soldiers approached to hear about the human sniper who had saved their mission. Lisa's reputation was spreading throughout the Alliance forces. The primitive weapon that had earned their scorn was now viewed with respect and curiosity. Human military methods deserved serious consideration. Captain Zilleth asked to examine the Deadeye Emblem one more time. The small marking had seemed insignificant earlier, but now represented proof of capabilities that exceeded alien understanding. She realized that humans had achievements that their technology could not measure or replicate. The conversation ended with Colonel Thexvar making an official request for Lisa to remain with Alliance forces as an instructor. Her skills were too valuable to waste on single missions. The entire Alliance could benefit from learning human precision warfare techniques. The primitive ballistic rifle had earned its place among the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. The transport back to Kepler Station was filled with intense discussions about human military capabilities. Colonel Thexvar sat across from Lisa, asking detailed questions about sniper training and philosophy. The destruction of 3 siege walkers had forced him to completely reconsider his assumptions about primitive weapons and their potential effectiveness. Lisa explained that human military development had taken a different path than most alien species. While other races focused on creating more powerful weapons, humans had concentrated on perfecting the soldiers who used those weapons. The most advanced technology was worthless without skilled operators who understood its capabilities and limitations. Captain Zilleth joined the conversation with her own questions about human training methods. She wanted to understand how Lisa had learned to identify weak points that computer sensors had missed. Lisa described years of studying mechanical systems and learning to think like an engineer, rather than just a soldier. The concept of engineering thinking intrigued the alien officers. Their weapons training focused on operating systems rather than understanding them. Lisa explained that human snipers studied the internal workings of their targets. Knowing how something functioned made it easier to identify ways to disable it. Colonel Thexvar asked about the reliability of ballistic weapons compared to energy systems. Lisa demonstrated by field stripping her rifle and reassembling it within minutes. She explained that mechanical systems had fewer failure points than electronic ones. Her weapon would function in conditions that would disable more complex systems. The aliens were surprised to learn that simplicity was actually an advantage in combat situations. Their energy weapons required specific atmospheric conditions and regular maintenance cycles, Lisa's rifle could operate in extreme temperatures, high humidity, or electromagnetic interference that would shut down energy weapons completely. Jake contributed to the discussion by showing the aliens his spotting equipment. The tools looked primitive compared to alien technology, but provided information that computer systems missed. Human spotters learned to read environmental conditions that sensors could not detect or interpret correctly. Lieutenant Corix examined Jake's wind measurement tools with curiosity. He had assumed that computer sensors would be more accurate than simple mechanical devices. Jake explained that electronic sensors measured specific data points but could not interpret the complex air currents that affected long-range shots. The conversation revealed fundamental differences in how humans and aliens approached problem-solving. Aliens relied on technology to provide solutions while humans developed personal skills to overcome challenges. Both approaches had advantages, but humans had learned to function without technological dependence. Lisa described the mental discipline required for precision shooting. Snipers learned to control their breathing, heart rate, and muscle tension to achieve perfect steadiness. This biological control could not be replicated by machines. The human body became a precision instrument. Through training and practice, Colonel Thexvar was fascinated by the psychological aspects of human marksmanship. He asked about the patience required to wait for perfect shooting conditions. Lisa explained that snipers often waited hours or even days for the right moment to take a shot. This level of patience was difficult for many humans to develop. The discussion turned to the Deadeye Emblem and what it truly represented. Captain Zillith had initially thought it was ceremonial decoration, but now understood its deeper significance. The emblem marked snipers who had transcended normal limitations through skill and determination, rather than technological enhancement. Jake shared more stories about Lisa's previous accomplishments. During the Titan Rebellion, she had eliminated enemy artillery spotters from distances that exceeded her rifle's published specifications. The shots required understanding of atmospheric physics that went beyond normal training. Lisa had taught herself advanced ballistics through personal study. The aliens began to appreciate that human excellence came from individual dedication rather than institutional programs. Lisa had developed her extraordinary skills through personal commitment to perfection. This approach created capabilities that could not be mass-produced or easily replicated. Lieutenant Corix asked about failure rates in human sniper training. Jake explained that most candidates failed to meet the standards because the program demanded natural talent combined with absolute dedication. The training was designed to identify and develop exceptional individuals rather than create average performers. Lisa emphasized that human marksmanship principles could benefit alien soldiers, even if they continued using energy weapons. Understanding precision, patience, and target analysis would improve anyone's combat effectiveness. The techniques were universal, even if the specific weapons were different. Colonel Thexvar made a surprising admission. He told Lisa that Zeltharian military doctrine had become too dependent on technological superiority. Their soldiers had lost many basic skills because computers handled most functions automatically. This dependence created vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit. The conversation helped aliens understand why human weapons seemed primitive, but performed beyond expectations. Simplicity allowed for reliability and precision that complex systems could not match. Human soldiers had learned to work with their equipment rather than depend on it completely. Captain Zillith asked about the philosophical differences between human and alien military thinking. Lisa explained that humans viewed conflict as a test of individual capability rather than technological advancement. The best weapon was the one that allowed human skills to shine rather than replacing those skills entirely. The discussion continued for hours as the transport approached Kepler Station. The aliens had gained new respect for human military methods and wanted to learn more. Lisa's demonstration had proven that primitive did not mean inferior when applied by skilled operators. Jake mentioned that human military history was filled with examples of simple weapons defeating complex ones. Superior training and tactics often overcame technological disadvantages. The Siege Walker battle was just the latest example of this principle in action. Colonel Thexvar asked Lisa to prepare a formal proposal for training Alliance forces in human precision techniques. He wanted to integrate human methods into Zeltharian military doctrine. The combination of alien technology with human skills could create unprecedented combat effectiveness. Lisa agreed to develop a training program, but insisted it must start with basic principles. Alien soldiers would need to learn fundamental marksmanship before advancing to specialized techniques. The program would require patience from instructors and students because human skills took time to develop. As the transport docked at Kepler Station, the aliens had gained new understanding of human capabilities. The primitive ballistic rifle had opened their eyes to possibilities they had never considered. Technology was important, but human excellence remained irreplaceable. Captain Zilith thanked Lisa for sharing her knowledge and changing their perspective on human weapons. She looked forward to learning more about precision warfare techniques. The Deadeye Emblem had become a symbol of capabilities that transcended technological limitations. The conversation ended with Colonel Thexvar making an official request for Lisa to remain with Alliance forces as a permanent instructor. Her skills were too valuable to waste on individual missions. The entire Alliance could benefit from learning human approaches to precision warfare and combat excellence. 3 weeks after the Siege Walker battle, the main conference room at Kepler Station buzzed with activity as representatives from across the Alliance gathered for an unprecedented meeting. Colonel Thexvar had called together military commanders from a dozen different species to discuss fundamental changes in Alliance tactical doctrine. The success against the Vrak forces had proven that human methods deserved serious consideration. Lisa stood at the front of the room beside a display showing the Siege Walker engagement. Her M24 rifle rested on a stand where every delegate could examine it. The weapon that had once been dismissed as primitive was now the centerpiece of a military revolution. Alliance engineers had studied the rifle extensively, but found that its effectiveness came from the operator rather than the technology. Admiral Kestar, the overall Alliance commander, addressed the assembled delegates. She explained that recent battles had revealed weaknesses in their current tactical approaches. Overdependence on technology had created vulnerabilities that enemies were learning to exploit. The Alliance needed to develop new capabilities based on individual skill rather than just advanced weapons. The Siege Walker engagement had become legendary throughout Alliance forces. Stories of the human sniper who destroyed 3 invincible machines with 3 impossible shots spread to every ship and station. More importantly, the victory had saved the mining colony and prevented the Vrak from gaining access to crucial, strategic resources. Colonel Thexvar presented his formal recommendation for integrating human training methods into Alliance military doctrine. He described how Lisa's precision techniques had succeeded where conventional weapons failed. The proposal called for establishing human-led training programs across all Alliance forces to develop skills that complemented technological capabilities. Captain Zilith spoke about her personal experience working with Lisa during the mission. She admitted that her initial skepticism about human weapons had been completely wrong. The Zeltharian officer had learned valuable lessons about patience, precision, and target analysis that improved her own combat effectiveness, even with energy weapons. Lieutenant Corks demonstrated some of the techniques he had learned from observing Lisa's methods. He showed how careful observation could reveal target vulnerabilities that sensors missed. His presentation emphasized that human approaches enhanced rather than replaced technological capabilities. The combination of skill and technology produced superior results. Lisa began her formal presentation by explaining the philosophy behind human precision warfare. She described how human soldiers learn to work with their equipment rather than depend on it completely. This approach created adaptability and resourcefulness that pure technology could not provide. Human methods emphasized understanding over automation. The alien delegates listened with intense interest as Lisa described human training principles. She explained that precision shooting required years of practice to develop the necessary skills. Students learned to control their physical and mental state to achieve perfect accuracy. The training was difficult, but produced capabilities that exceeded technological limitations. Jake supported Lisa's presentation by describing the spotting techniques that made extreme range shots possible. He showed how human observers learned to read environmental conditions that computer sensors could not interpret. The combination of human intelligence and simple tools often provided better information than advanced electronic systems. Admiral Kestar asked about the scalability of human training methods. She wanted to know if these techniques could be taught to large numbers of alien soldiers. Lisa replied that the basic principles were universal, but individual results would vary based on natural ability and dedication. Not everyone could become a Deadeye sniper, but everyone could improve their precision and effectiveness. The discussion turned to practical implementation of the training program. Colonel Thexvar outlined plans for establishing human-led academies at major Alliance facilities. These schools would teach fundamental marksmanship principles before advancing to specialized techniques. The program would require significant investment, but promised revolutionary improvements in combat capability. Several alien commanders expressed concern about abandoning their advanced technology in favor of primitive methods. Lisa clarified that she was not suggesting they discard energy weapons, but rather enhance their effectiveness through improved operator skills. Technology and training should work together, rather than competing against each other. Captain Xyleth described how human methods had improved her own performance with Zeltharian weapons. She had learned to identify targets more effectively and make precise shots under difficult conditions. The techniques Lisa taught were applicable regardless of the specific weapon system being used. Precision principles were universal. The presentation included demonstration footage from the Siege Walker battle. The delegates watched in amazement as Lisa's 3 shots destroyed enemies that had resisted concentrated fire from multiple energy weapons. The impossible had become reality through human skill and determination. Technology alone was not enough to guarantee victory. Lieutenant Cork shared his experience learning to shoot without computer assistance. He had discovered that manual targeting required greater awareness and understanding of ballistic principles. The process was more difficult, but provided better results under adverse conditions. Human methods created more capable soldiers overall. Admiral Kessitar announced her decision to approve the human training program. She authorized the establishment of precision warfare academies at 5 major Alliance facilities. Lisa would lead the program development and train instructors who could teach human methods to alien soldiers. The initiative represented a fundamental shift in Alliance military philosophy. The alien delegates voted unanimously to support the new training program. They had seen proof that human methods could succeed where traditional approaches failed. The Siege Walker victory demonstrated that skill and precision were as important as technological advancement. The Alliance needed both elements to achieve maximum effectiveness. Lisa accepted the position as Director of Precision Warfare Training for the Alliance. She would work with alien engineers to adapt human techniques for different species and weapon systems. The program would start with basic marksmanship principles and gradually advance to specialized applications. Success would require patience from both instructors and students. Colonel Thexvar privately thanked Lisa for changing his perspective on human capabilities. He admitted that his initial dismissiveness had been based on ignorance rather than understanding. The Siege Walker battle had taught him valuable lessons about the relationship between technology and skill. Human methods deserved respect and serious study. Captain Xyleth volunteered to serve as Lisa's assistant in developing the training program. She wanted to help other alien soldiers discover the benefits of human precision techniques. Her experience working with Lisa had convinced her that these methods could revolutionize Alliance combat effectiveness. The partnership between human and alien approaches would benefit everyone. The meeting concluded with Admiral Kessitar making an official announcement. She declared that human precision warfare techniques would become standard training for all Alliance military personnel. The program would begin immediately at selected facilities and expand based on initial results. The primitive ballistic rifle had triggered a military revolution. As delegates filed out of the conference room, many approached Lisa to express their interest in the training program. The Deadeye Emblem on her rifle had become a symbol of excellence that transcended species boundaries. Human methods were no longer considered primitive but rather sophisticated approaches that complemented advanced technology. Jake watched proudly as his partner received recognition for capabilities that had been dismissed just weeks earlier. The Siegewalker battle had proven that human precision and alien technology could work together to achieve impossible results. Lisa's rifle represented the perfect fusion of simple reliability and extraordinary skill. The Alliance had learned that the most advanced weapon was a combination of superior technology and exceptional training. Human methods provided the missing element that pure technological development could not supply. The partnership between different species and approaches would make the Alliance stronger than any individual contribution could achieve alone. Lisa looked at her rifle one final time before securing it for transport to the new training facility. The Deadeye Emblem caught the light as she worked, no longer a curiosity but a respected symbol of human excellence. The impossible shots were just the beginning of what human and alien cooperation could accomplish together.